The wind blew like it had something to say. Dust kicked up from the wagon ruts as Jack Callahan rode into what used to be a town. Just two buildings stood proud now, barely. One was the general store, its windows boarded. The other was the saloon, its sign hanging by a single nail, creaking with every breath of wind. He dismounted slow, boots crunching gravel, and pulled a folded paper from inside his worn coat. $1, and it's yours. No questions asked. The ink was faded, but the seal was still fresh enough to be legal. He turned the paper over again, like maybe it would say something different this time. But never did. A man in a wide hat leaned against a post, chewing a toothpick, watching him. "You looking for that ranch?" the man asked, spitting dust. Jack didn't answer. He rarely did these days. The man nodded anyway. "You'll find it 2 valleys west. Was a Monroe place. Folks said it was cursed. Last fella who went out there came back screaming about a girl in the walls. Ain't been back since." Jack tipped his hat and walked away. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in war. And war made every place cursed in its own way. His horse, an old black mare named Dusty, picked her way through the scrub as the sun began to bleed out behind the hills. Shadows stretched long over the land, and the path thinned into a single, winding trail as they climbed higher. Flashbacks came without asking. The smoke from burned towns. The sound of his brother's voice in the last hour before dawn. The color of blood and water. The way a man can be there 1 second and torn open the next. He gritted his teeth and pressed on. The ranch appeared near twilight, cradled between 2 slopes like a secret the land didn't want to tell. The gate was crooked, held up by stubborn weeds. A faded wooden sign still read, "Monroe Ranch." Half the letters had peeled. The house was a sagging thing, 2 stories. Chimney leaning like it had arthritis, porch half-eaten by time. The barn looked worse. A single lantern could have lit the whole place, and still there'd be shadow to spare. He tethered Dusty by the fence and stepped up the porch. Floorboards creaked under his weight. He knocked once out of habit. No answer. The door wasn't locked. It never is in places nobody wants to visit. Inside, the air was cold and still, like a house that hadn't remembered how to breathe. Jack pulled his revolver before stepping in. Cobwebs danced in the corners. Furniture draped in white sheets, like the dead trying to look alive. An iron stove in the corner. A rusted kettle. He lit a match and found the lantern. When it flared to life, the shadows retreated, but only just. He walked through each room, slow, careful. Dust on every surface. A boot print in the dirt that wasn't his. Recent. Kitchen. Empty. Pantry ransacked long ago. Parlor. Piano keys warped from sun and silence. Stairs. Broken in the middle but climbable. He paused, then started up. Gun drawn. Lantern high. The hallway upstairs was narrow. Doors closed. Something scraped behind the far one. He moved slowly. Stopped at the door. The handle was cold. He pushed it open. A blast of air. A flash of movement. Something clicked. He froze. Across the attic, half hidden in the slant of the roof, stood a girl. Teenage. Ragged. Filthy. But her eyes, sharp, wild, animal bright. She held a rifle in both hands, too big for her frame, but steady as stone. A single lock of copper blonde hair fell across her face. Her clothes were patchwork, stitched and torn. Her feet were bare. She didn't tremble. Jack did not lower his weapon. Neither did she. Her voice was low and cold. "You don't belong here. Let me know when you're ready for part 2. The girl in the rafters, 1,000 words, and I'll continue with the next act of the story." Jack didn't move. Neither did the girl. They stood in silence for what felt like a full minute, 2 ghosts staring each other down. The beam from Jack's lantern flickered between them, catching the steel glint of the rifle in her hands and the steady rise and fall of her breath. She didn't look scared, just ready. Finally, Jack lowered his gun, slow and deliberate. "Not looking for trouble," he said, voice dry from dust. "Just shelter. Cold out." She said nothing, just watched. Eyes like a hawk. When he stepped back, she didn't follow. By morning, she was gone. Jack spent the day cleaning what he could. Threw a sheet over the cracked parlor window. Fixed the hinge on the cellar door. found a handful of canned peaches behind the stove, and ate them cold with a tin spoon. He tried to cook something that night, cornmeal biscuits and dried beans he'd brought in a saddlebag. The fire popped in the hearth, casting warm orange light across the peeling wallpaper and barewood floor. He sat on the floor and took his first bite. Then it hit him. He looked at the plate beside him. Gone. So was the girl. She'd taken the food and vanished like smoke. The wolves came next. The howls began just past midnight. Long and mournful, distant at first, then closer. Jack sat upright in the shadows, revolver in one hand, a shovel in the other. The barn groaned in the wind. Dusty kicked the stall. Something scratched at the porch. He moved through the house, hammering planks across the open windows with what nails he had left. The house groaned and creaked, but held. By dawn, he'd barely slept. But the girl never came back. 3 more days passed. Jack found traps in the woods. Good ones, crafted from old tin and string, clever like an animal that had learned to build. A rabbit had already been caught and gutted, its blood frozen in the snow. Nearby, hanging from a branch, were herbs twisted into a bundle. Some he recognized, others he didn't. Someone had been living here a long time, surviving. He found the cellar next, behind a loose plank under the stairs. A hidden room, dry, lined with shelves, dried beans, jars of pickled roots, old tobacco tins labeled in a girl's careful hand. A small blanket lay rolled in one corner, a diary beside it, but the pages had been torn out. She hadn't run from the house. She lived in it. He wasn't the intruder. The storm came hard and fast. Thunder cracked over the hills. Winds ripped shingle from the roof and turned the chimney, smoke sideways. Jack moved quickly, covering the hearth and pinning the door shut with a beam. Rain pelted the windows in sheets. The house groaned and shook like it remembered every storm it had ever survived. Then, just before dark, he heard it. A bang at the porch. He flung open the door. There she was, soaked to the skin, mud smeared across her legs, a rope of firewood slung across her back. Her hair was tangled, lips blue. She dropped the bundle and staggered forward without meeting his eyes. Then she said it, quiet as a prayer. "Don't let the fire die." Jack didn't speak. He just stepped aside and let her in. She sat by the hearth, silent, holding her arms around her knees. Steam rose off her. He handed her a blanket. She didn't say thank you, just stared into the flames like they were telling stories only she could hear. Jack poured water from the kettle into a tin mug and passed it to her. She took it with both hands. He watched the firelight flicker across her face. "I won't ask questions," he said softly. "Not unless you want me to." She looked at him then, like she was trying to decide something. She didn't answer. That was enough. That night, they shared the fire. He sat on one side, she on the other. She didn't sleep, and neither did he. The wind howled through the chimney. The girl curled tighter in her blanket, and Jack rose quietly to fetch his coat. He draped it over her shoulders. She didn't flinch, didn't thank him either, but she didn't take it off. By morning, she was gone again. Jack stepped outside, scanning the horizon. The snow had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the land. He walked toward the barn, intending to check the fences. The door squealed as he opened it. Inside, the smell of damp hay and old iron. He stopped near the wall, something carved into the wood. 2 sets of initials, YM plus LM. Below it, nailed into the timber, a faded ribbon stained dark red. Wind tugged at the loose end like it wanted to speak. Someone else had been here. Someone who mattered. Let me know when you'd like me to write part 3. The Man Who Never Came Back, 1,000 words. It will dive deeper into Evie's secret, Jack's past, and the approaching danger. The morning after the storm, frost clung to the windows like breath. Jack found her tracks in the snow again, small, careful prints leading behind the house toward the woodshed. But it wasn't the girl he followed this time. It was a feeling, something unfinished. He returned to the hidden cellar. The light from his lantern flickered across the dirt walls as he scanned the shelves again. Behind a loose board near the back, he found it, a leather-bound journal, water-warped and stained with time. A ribbon, like the one in the barn, marked a page. The handwriting was careful, steady. Mail, Levi Monroe. Jack sat cross-legged and began to read. March 3rd. They came again last night. Third time this week. Evie saw them first. Two men on horses, faces covered. I told her not to speak, not to open the door. They're looking for something. Or someone. March 6th. Evie's scared. She won't say it, but I know. Mama would sing her to sleep. I'm not Mama. I ain't even Pa. I'm just a boy with a shotgun and a sister who thinks I know what I'm doing. March 10th. Out of food. Gotta make a supply run to Milner's Ridge. Told Evie to stay hidden in the cellar. Left her my coat and Pa's rifle. Told her I'd be back before moonrise. She asked me what happens if I'm not. I told her not to think like that. But I did. I thought like that the whole damn ride. Jack stopped reading. His fingers trembled against the page. The last entry was torn. The date smeared with blood. He turned the page anyway. Found no more words. Just silence. Jack stepped outside, journal pressed to his chest. The girl sat by the fire pit, feeding it pine cones, her face blank. He approached slowly and said just one word. Evie. She froze. Turned. He held out the journal. I read it. She stared for a long time. Eyes glassy. No anger. Just the ache of hearing her own name after too many months of silence. Then she broke. She didn't scream or sob. Just folded forward, shoulders shaking, and pressed her hands over her mouth. Jack knelt beside her, unsure whether to hold her or let her be. I waited, she whispered, voice cracked and raw. I waited 5 nights, then 10, then spring came, then winter again. She looked up, eyes red. He never came back. Jack didn't have words, so he gave her something else. By afternoon, they were in the field behind the barn. Snow had melted just enough to show the old cross. 2 sticks tied together, half buried, leaning with time. Jack knelt beside it and placed the blood-stained ribbon at the base. Then he pulled a hunting knife from his belt and carved into the wood. Levi Monroe, a brother, a promise. He deserves a marker, Jack said softly. Evie nodded. He deserves to come home. The cougar came that night. Jack woke to the sound of splintered wood and Dusty's whinny outside. He grabbed his rifle and ran into the cold. The goat pen was torn open. Blood sprayed across the snow. One goat already down, its neck open and twitching. The other bleated in terror. Then it struck, fur and teeth and speed. Jack fired too late. The shot grazed the cougar's side, but not before it raked across his arm, sending him sprawling. Evie was there in seconds, her brother's rifle leveled steady. One shot. Clean. The beast slumped into the snow, twitching once. Then still. The next hour was a blur. Evie dragged Jack inside, his coat soaked in blood. His arm had deep gouges, bone deep in one place. She boiled water, ground herbs, and stitched in silence. Her hands were quick, rough, practiced. Jack winced but said nothing. You should have waited, she muttered, tying off the last stitch. You shoot better than I do, he said through gritted teeth. She smirked for half a second. You think I wanted you to see me cry? He chuckled, then groaned. Damn right I didn't. Later, as the fire crackled and wind pressed against the windows, Jack spoke again. My brother, his name was Daniel. Evie looked up. He was a deserter. Said he couldn't shoot boys our age, even if they wore gray. Called it God's mercy. The other men called it treason. He went back for me when I got caught behind during a retreat. Took a bullet for it. He stared into the fire. We all lose someone, he said. But that don't mean we stop being someone. Evie watched him for a long moment. You're not like the others. He blinked. What others? The men who've come here. They always want something. You don't. Jack shook his head. Edo. What? A place to matter again. Just then, a rifle shot cracked in the distance. Both froze. Evie stood, grabbed the rifle. Jack limped to the window. A rider sat just beyond the tree line, still as a statue, watching the ranch. The figure turned their horse slowly and disappeared into the trees. Evie's voice was flat. They're back. Let me know when you're ready for part 4. The fire that made them stay, 1,000 words, where we'll conclude the story with a suspenseful showdown, emotional climax, and a bittersweet but powerful resolution. The air in the cellar was cold, still heavy with the damp scent of root vegetables and old earth. Jack crouched low, lantern in one hand, the other prying at the edge of shelf near the back wall. Something had caught his eye, a sliver of leather peeking from between two loose floorboards. He pulled it free. A weather-worn journal, its spine cracked and edges swollen from age and moisture. The initials LM were burned faintly into the cover. Jack flipped through the first few pages, careful not to tear the brittle paper. The writing was clean, deliberate, letters shaped like someone young, trying to seem older. The ink had faded in places, smudged in others, but the story was there, bleeding through time. March 1st. They came again. 2 riders this time. Pa's gone and Ma's sick. Evie cried all night. I boarded the back window with Pa's old trunk. I don't know how much longer we can hold out. If anything happens to me, and she finds this... Evie, you stay hidden. You stay alive. March 3rd. Food's near gone. I'll have to make the supply run. I told her I'd be back by sundown. Told her not to open the door for no one but me. If I don't make it. The rest was torn, the page stained red. Jack closed the book with trembling fingers. He looked up the stairs toward the fading light of day. Evie was on the porch when he emerged, her legs tucked beneath her, staring toward the trees with an unreadable expression. He walked over, knelt beside her, and placed the journal gently in her lap. I found it, he said softly. In the cellar. Her eyes went wide the moment she recognized the cover. She didn't touch it, didn't blink. Jack's voice caught as he said her name aloud for the first time. Evie. A long, aching pause. Then her shoulders fell. A breath shuddered from her chest, and she bent forward, cradling her face in her hands. No sobs, just silence, broken only by the wind pushing across the porch. He said he'd come back before sundown, she whispered. He promised. Jack sat with her, letting the weight of that grief settle between them. Not trying to fix it, just honoring it. Later, as dusk crept across the sky, they walked behind the barn, Evie leading now. A crooked wooden cross marked the patch of ground where wildflowers hadn't grown since last spring. Jack held the ribbon they'd found in the rafters, still stained with dried blood. He knelt beside the grave, drove a new post into the soil, and carved slowly with his knife. Levi Monroe, a brother, a guardian, a promise. He deserves a marker, Jack said. Evie whispered, he deserved a future. That night, they lost the goat. Jack heard it first, a panicked bleat and the crack of wood splintering. He grabbed his rifle and limped into the cold, blood thundering in his ears. The pen was torn open, snow sprayed with crimson. The goat lay twitching, throat torn open. Jack barely raised his rifle before the cougar pounced. He fell hard, its claws raking his forearm as they tumbled. Then a shot rang out. The beast dropped, dead. Evie stood 10 feet away, the barrel of her brother's rifle still smoking. They dragged Jack back inside, blood soaking through his sleeve. Evie boiled water, tore strips of clean cloth, and sewed with steady hands, silent, focused. Her eyes never left the wound. You do this often? Jack asked through gritted teeth. Stitched my own leg once, she muttered. You win. A pause. Then she said, You're not like the others. He turned to look at her. What others? She sat back, tying the bandage. Men who came sniffing after the place. They'd hear about the ranch, cheap, abandoned. Thought they could just walk in, own it. And they didn't last long. Jack winced as she tied off the knot. Why? Because this house remembers, she said quietly. And so do I. When the bleeding stopped and the fire crackled low, Jack spoke again. My brother's name was Daniel. Evie looked up. He walked away from the war. Called it a sin to keep killing boys who didn't want to die. Deserted. I stayed. But when I got wounded at Shiloh, he came back for me. Dragged me through the mud, through the bullets. Got shot doing it. Jack's voice grew distant. Everyone said he was a coward. But I know better. He died doing the bravest thing I ever saw. Evie stared at him, something soft flickering in her gaze. We all lose someone, he said. But that don't mean we stop being someone. Just then it came. A sharp crack, rifle fire. Jack shot to his feet. Evie was already at the window, eyes scanning the woods. There at the tree line, a rider on horseback, still, watching, too far to make out the face. Just a dark coat, a glint of silver at the saddle, and the unmistakable way the horse shifted under him. He didn't come closer, just turned and vanished into the trees. Jack slowly lowered his rifle. Evie said what they were both thinking. They're back.